evening, everyone. Welcome to the virtual book talk. Great meetings build great teams. Um, this virtual event is hosted by Project Management Ready, a nonprofit dedicated to empowering the youth with project management. No matter where you are and where you are from, I'm very excited to have you to join us for an intergenerational conversation. Okay, before we begin the conversation, please let me announce some housekeeping matters. Firstly, this meeting will be recorded. Secondly, please hold your questions until the discussion sessions, or you can type the question in the chat and we'll try to get to you. Mute yourself unless speaking, turn on the video if possible, and yeah, complete the post-event survey. And then for the agenda, we will get to know the authors first, and then we'll do like a get to know you. Then we'll get to know the book, and we'll have a quick discussion, a Q&A, and we're going to do a message for the youth. And if you are a PMI certified member, please remember that you can earn 1 free PDU from attending this book talk. Okay, it is my great honor to introduce your 2 panelists this evening. They are the co-authors of the book, Great Meetings Build Great Teams. They are Professor Rich Maltzman and Mr. Jim Stewart. Professor Maltzman has co-authored several books on project leadership, including Bridging the PM Competency Gap and the Cleland-award winning Green Project Management. He teaches a suite of courses in project leadership, serving as a master lecturer at Boston University. Mr. Jim Stewart has facilitated dozens of project meetings, from kickoffs to planning meetings to Scrum events. As an independent project consultant and Agile coach, he advises on best practices, teaches project management and strategies, and executes on Agile transformations. Professor Maltzman and Mr. Stewart, welcome and thank you for giving your book talk to our audience today.
Sure.
Please
Thank
unmute
you.
yourself and say a quick hello to us.
Go ahead, Rich. Would you like us to just say another couple words?
I think she said that, yeah.
All right. So yeah, it's glad to be here. It's great to talk to younger people, of course, just about everybody, and to engage with high school students and people who love to read, and we like to write and read. So we will try to get to our material as soon as possible. So Jim, over to you.
Yeah, just a quick note. Rich and I have known each other for a number of years, live not too far away from each other in Massachusetts, and have collaborated on another book and several projects we worked on. I spoke at his conference at BU, Boston University, my alma mater, a month or so ago, whatever that was. And you know, I do independent project management. And for those who may see that word agile that may crop up, it's outside of the scope of this session for the most part, but for the longest time we've done traditional project management. Agile is an alternative that's grown in popularity over the past 10 plus years, and I do a fair amount in that as well. So that's me, and that's what brings us here.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Oh, also, so I've been like, oh, thank you for the introduction. Well, like, by the way, when I first read like the book cover, my first impression was how interesting the book was, and like the book cover especially. Like, I am all about like secret or like not so secret hidden meanings. So like, is there any meaning behind the book cover that you'd like to share with us? Because it looks really interesting.
Yeah,
I'm going to defer to Rich on this one because he'll go on about. And who was our talk about very quickly our artist on this? Rich, give her a plug.
Yes. So the artist of this book is a Canadian woman named Christina Carlson. She has her own consulting company. I noticed she's starting, I don't know if you saw this, Jim, she's starting to post cartoons on LinkedIn, kind of project-oriented comedy, if you will. and we need that.
Right.
Those PMI practitioners, you know what I'm talking about. We need a little bit of relief, comic relief. So she drew this for us. She liked the idea, and we'll talk about this, of meeting goblins. Meeting goblins are people's personalities that sometimes come out during a meeting. They aren't always like that. And if you look on the cover that Evelyn has up, you'll see, for example, there's a couple of people in the kind of the northwest part of that table with shadows. Those shadows are indicating they're perhaps maybe bullying or
Oh,
overbearing personalities that may not be there all the time, but they come out at meetings. Just like, and I don't know how many of you drive cars or ride bikes or walk, but if you notice, sometimes drivers take on a different personality and say a few choice words when someone cuts them off that they would never say, in their home or apartment. So this idea of shadows to indicate these personalities was something that Christina came up with, and we went with it.
Right. And we call them goblins, but we'll get into that.
yeah, the goblins are very interesting. Yeah, like it's the book cover. I mean, it seems very like multicultural too, like very diverse, and it's a hybrid. It looks like it's a hybrid meeting
It is a
because
hybrid meeting.
yeah, because there's
Yes.
online, in person. Yeah.
Yeah. You get the Brady Bunch on the TV screen. We're showing our age here, but you have the Brady Bunch effect of several people on the screen, in like we have here, if depending on how you're viewing Zoom, and then you have people at the table drinking coffee or water with their project documents in front of them. Some of them have no shadow at the moment because they're just acting like regular good old people.
Or their bad side doesn't come out. And
Their
another
best.
thing about that too, I do a fair amount of, I'm working at a company now, they're writing a project management simulation, and I'm their subject matter expert. And in addition to looking at subject matter expert stuff, I'm always looking for Americanisms or too much slang or not diverse enough. So we're always trying to make sure, Rich and I, when I do my stuff, make sure that that's the world that we live in, and try to make sure. But I really, even with ours, I try to make sure the Americanisms. And a recent project I worked on, that Agile transformation, it was me and another American guy and a French woman, and she was in Lyon, I believe. And
Mhm.
he would always come up with French slang or American slang, and I would get on Slack and type to her, "That means this," and she would give me a smiley face. So I would explain the slang to her as we're going along. So I feel very sensitive to that, and I don't want people to who are reading this in, China or someplace trying to understand American slang. We don't even understand it. So I like to make it across the board types of things. And it can be offensive too, right?
Yes,
So we gotta watch out for that.
Unintentionally.
Right. Yes. So threw that in.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I didn't notice that some like didn't really have shadows. Some did. But yeah, okay. So
It takes
now
work to make sure it's not just white male stuff, which is what Rich and I are. Right.
Yeah,
Takes a
exactly.
certain amount of work.
uh okay, so now we're gonna um so now like we're going to get to know each other, and so just type in the chat your answer based on the red number next to your answer. So for example, mine would be, well, I'm a middle school, like what is your role? I'm a middle school, I'm a high school student now. So I would type 1, and my knowledge level of project management. Well, I would say that I'm still learning, and it's so I would say I'm a medium, so I would type an M. And what is your feeling about hosting project meetings? Well, I am hosting them, so I would say I love it. So L. Yeah, so I would just type 1M and L in the chat.
Are you sure, Evelyn, that you don't work for the IRS? This is very, very bureaucratic, put things into codes. Okay, I've done it.
Okay.
I'm seeing some come through just for our interest, right?
Yeah. Okay. We have one more. Well, a few more seconds.
People are neutral about meetings generally, huh?
Mm.
It's true. Most people walk into a meeting and they're usually not already frowning or angry, and they're usually not, but they're also usually not beaming and smiling. They're kind of
But remember here, the question that you're talking about hosting them, Rich, which is,
hosting.
yeah, there could be nerves involved, or I've done 100 of these and they never went well.
That's true. Read the question, Rich.
Well, again, attending, we talk about attending. You put something in the book about what incentivizes you to come to a meeting, right? So that was a different thing.
Yeah.
If you're not the host.
Okay. Okay. I am glad to see our audience coming from such diverse backgrounds. Welcome again. And no matter how you feel about hosting project meetings, or how you might, or how much like you know about project management, I'm confident that you will find the book, Great Meetings, Build Great Teams, very insightful, because I know I did. And I really liked it. It was really creative with the goblins and everything. And so Professor Maltzman and Mr. Stewart, so do any of you do any of you want to define some key concepts in your book for some of us who are fairly new to project management?
Is
Sure.
that for us to do, or do you want your attendees to do it and we'll review it? What's your
Have them take a shot first, and then
what do you want to do there?
Sure, but yeah, sure.
Hey, you have PMI members on who should definitely know the definition of a project.
Better. We'll do it however you want, with your audience or with us, whichever you prefer.
Anyone can share. Yeah, feel free to share too. Yeah.
Well,
So anyone want to take a shot? What's the definition of a project?
yeah, everybody wants to give a shot. If not, we'll fill in the blanks. Don't be shy. You can speak up or chat it.
Project success, project management.
Okay.
I don't see anything here, so I'll say that I'm going to paraphrase the textbook definition.
Right.
By the way, there are textbooks. There are a million textbooks in project management. All right, somebody has
Jose Juan.
Personal group. Okay, people are answering some stuff here.
Yeah. Roxy,
Yeah.
good answer. Not a very PMI-ish answer, but a very good answer.
Right. The
I think
beginning and end is important. That it ends. If it doesn't end, it's an operation.
It has a key word. It begins with U.
Okay. Oh, right.
Unique.
Yes, unique.
Very good, Yansu.
And the other word we want to have in there is temporary. So if you're going to build a monument, the building of the monument is temporary, but it will last hopefully forever. And it provides a service or a value. We're sort of paraphrasing. When I started talking about textbook, there are a million textbooks, but yes. Yes, temporary does not mean short, as Rich says. The project management body of knowledge is what Project Management Institute puts out every 3 to 4 years. And that's sort of our textbook, our Bible, if you will. They had Project Management Body of Knowledge version 6. It's been what's archived, I guess you would say, and now version 7 is it. So, and there's major differences between them, but that's what we go to for our definition. So yes, temporary, unique endeavor for some service and a result, service, project, or result. Or service, what's the other word, Rich? Service, product, or result. Thank you.
It's service, product, or result. Yes.
Gotta be temporary. So
the second bullet, we could have a 7-hour seminar and still not get it right. People argue about this all the time, and I'm just going to quickly try to close it off and say there are project measurements of success: being on time, under budget, and meeting the specs or the quality level of whatever the project was supposed to deliver. A new microphone, a new mouse, there we go, a new mouse, right? So that's measurement of the project's progress and the project accomplishing what it said it would do on time. But then what if no one uses the mouse, or the mouse explodes after 3 months?
Right.
So is that part of project success or not? Big debate in our field. This is something where Evelyn mentioned I wrote the book on, co-authored the book on green project management. We're trying to get project managers, and we need you young people to carry the mantle of this, to carry this on. We're trying to shift the thinking that project managers should at least consider the product of their project in the longer term. So don't get me started, because that will be 3 hours.
Sustainability.
Jim knows.
Right. Well,
but that's why project success is a little difficult to define.
But to Rich's point, you can have a project that's on time, on budget, and the customer can still say, I didn't like it. So one of the things I've discovered is you could put 10 people who are the leaders of a project, senior manager, in a room and say, define success. It's when we ship. No, it's when we make profit. No, it's when it works, etc. So if what Rich is saying is true, that nobody knows the success is, because they haven't defined it. You can't just flip a coin. And if the leaders don't agree with successes, how can you ever know when you reached it? Right.
So that's one of the jobs of a PM, per Jim's comments there, is to, for the project team, make sure they understand and you communicate with them how we view project success as a team. And it should reflect on what the company thinks about it. And whether the project manager carries on and looks at the final product for two more months afterwards, that's up to the organization. But the project manager, like Jim says, needs to clarify that, or you have these endless projects. Right. And some people, I'm sure, on the call have been on projects that never ended because no one said what success was.
Do you want to take project management, Rich, and I'll do leaders and agilists?
Project management is just applying talent, skills, capabilities that you gain, like hopefully in sessions like this, applying those things to projects to make them more successful. Now, that book I was showing you earlier, Evelyn, from Eddie Obeng, he uses the word project leader. And one of the other things I'd like to do is try to change our titles. Because management, think about managing, right? Ask someone, how are you doing? Well, I manage, I get by, right? Management has this aspect of supervision and just kind of getting by. That ain't us. Sorry for the poor English there. That is not us. We should be leading projects. We have to inspire people to get the project work done. They don't even work for us often. Right. So, sorry for the speech, but project management is the general term for applying skills, knowledge, and capabilities to projects. I would argue that we should start calling it project leadership.
And what I always like about Rich's speech is he delivers them with a certain amount of verve, and I enjoy that. But anyone younger who hasn't done project management, Rich made an important point. You typically don't have direct reports. Very often you're working for a manager, a leader, whoever it might be, and you're working at what we call a matrix environment, and you're sort of loaned people for that. Now you have an authority granted you by a charter to get them to do things, but they don't report to you necessarily. That's an important thing. Right. Now, leaders and agilists, I know in the PMBOK, again, to paraphrase project management body of knowledge, they differentiate between managers and leaders. I didn't necessarily like what I read on some of the slides. It's not to disparage a manager. A manager makes sure that things are taken care of, doles out tasks, etc. But a leader may produce a vision. And it was what Rich was talking about when he talked about the success. You know, especially when you're in the trenches and it takes a long time to deliver something, the leader says, here's the shiny object we're creating. When you're down and out, this is the cool thing we're creating, everybody. Let's go have a party somewhere, celebrate our recent successes. That's what we're going for. That's what a leader does. He inspires, she inspires. There's a vision. A manager might just say, you know, go do your job. And Agile, as I mentioned earlier, Agile, just to very, very, very quickly give you an idea. In traditional, or what we call waterfall project management, which goes back a number of years, we plan heavily and we execute to that plan. And the assumption is that we know what we want at the end. However, human nature is such that people think they know what they want. As it builds and as it grows, their mind changes when they see the result of the work. That's why Agile came along. Now, Agile's been actually produced, Agilists do Agile, has been in some fashion before 2001. But in 2001, some software developers wrote a document called the Agile Manifesto, and they laid out the idea that you work in short sprints of work and that the scope can be changeable. So a product owner could say, now that I see what you've done, I've changed my mind and I want to do something else. So Agile, is nimble. Whereas the waterfall is like, you better know what you're making because you don't get a lot of opportunity to change, minus a laborious change order. The traditional project management is plan-driven. Agile is change-driven. And very often, I'll just say this in the last thing, almost everything you see in software is coming from Agile. Spotify is famous for it. Microsoft does it. Google does it. Everybody does it. All software is created virtually with Agile these days. Less so on non-software projects, although I just came from a scientific one where the scientists were using it. It's not taking over, despite the Agilist thinking it is. We live in a hybrid world of waterfall and Agile, but it's something for you to know. If you go into project management, I mentored a guy, and I said, you can't just be traditional project manager more. You have to know Agile. So I'll tell you folks the same thing. Agile has to be in your plate going forward because it's quite popular. It's not a fad. It's not going away. So it's an important thing to know about, and you can read up on that.
And we do talk about this in the book. There's an appendix that has kind of a project management primer,
Right.
and a vocabulary, and then examples of things like network diagrams and information radiators and things like that. So
Right.
we recognize that people picking up this book may be new to project management.
Right.
It's not meant to be a beginner's guide to project management. It's a meetings book, but there's a significant amount of learning about general project management. So I had to put a plug in for that. Sorry.
Yep.
Okay. Well, now we have some questions, and so like there's a lot of science in project project meetings. How does it connect? So how does science exactly like connect to project meetings? Like what science is in project meetings?
Yeah, so most people would not connect science and meetings. A meeting is a meeting, right? And we get together and we talk about something and we leave. What's so scientific about that? Well, this image you have on the screen is an example. There's a bunch of things that have come from a book by Dr. Steven Rogelberg. He has a book called The Surprising Science of Meetings, and we drew from that book heavily because he's been studying this for years. And one of the things, I don't even know if that came from Dr. Rogelberg's book or not, but one of the things that came from his book was this idea that came from the science of meetings, is that at the top, you see brain scans of people who are going to consecutive back-to-back meetings. And by the way, you guys, some of you are students. This could be the same for back-to-back classes,
Wow.
right? And a meeting, a classroom session is a meeting as well, right? And you don't have to think too hard about that. It's an exchange of information, right? It's a meeting. So you may see your own brain here if you go from math to science to social studies, etc., without much of a break. That red is showing the amount of what's called beta activity or stress. In the lower example, the same person had a break between meetings. Same kind of brain scans. It must have been strange with that person with all those electrodes at the meeting. Is this kind of AI taking over? Anyway, sorry, I had to make that comment. But the cool blue is indicating less stress simply by introducing breaks. That's an example. One that came up after we talked about this, Evelyn, and also it came from Steve Rogelberg's talk at Google. And I recommend that you watch it. I can send you the link. Was the science of animals and meetings. We don't think about animals having meetings. I mean, basically, if you have a dog, their meeting is basically asking for food. But wild African dogs actually they've studied the science of this. They have meetings. They go out to hunt. They go back to the den, and literally they sneeze. And a sneeze means let's go back out and hunt again. And no sneeze means let's take a nap. And they vote, and they've studied this now for years, and they can understand that there's kind of a majority voting system with some weighting for the alpha males and alpha females. And basically, it's like the electoral college. And they go and hunt based on these sneezes. Now, that's just a kind of a fun fact, but there are a ton, and I won't bore you with all the details, but there's a ton of science, including this idea of the breaks, including just the studying meetings from a data perspective. There's something called meeting. Oh shoot, I can't remember the name of it now. But there's if you leave a meeting unhappy, bring that with you, not just to the next meeting. Bring that back to your job. There's a lot of commiserating that happens. So the outcomes of a poor meeting aren't just that things don't get done. I'm talking about project meetings. The impact is that there's kind of a virus that can in the organization. So it really is incumbent on us as project managers who end up facilitating a lot of meetings to try to do a good job. That's the part.
Add one thing to this. This may seem unrealistic in the real world that there are these back-to-back. I worked for a financial services company here a few years ago, and all of their project managers whether it was the nature of the beast or the way these people worked, or they had too much work, I don't know, but I thought it was generally a bad idea.
Yep. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah. I think it's very useful to have a break, especially because I do violin and everything, or same with any extracurricular really. But when there's a break in between, you get, I think, well, for me at least, I get more motivated
Right,
and
refreshing.
do better. Yeah, and do better next practice or meeting.
Absolutely. Or anything.
Yeah, so
okay.
How would you define a successful project meeting?
Let me take a stab at this. So Rich and I have discussed it. I think a successful anything, we just talked about success, if the meeting meets the objectives. Now, what are the objectives of the meeting? You publish an agenda. You should publish one. We're going to discuss this, and this. Say there's 3 or 4 items in a half-hour meeting. Let's just throw that hypothetically. Our goal, firstly, is to discuss these 3 or 4 things. Number 1. Number 2, there might be some decisions that need to be made. Number 3, action items based on those decisions. People assigned to those, dates assigned to those. Let's go to the unsuccessful one, first of all. The unsuccessful one, you have 4 agenda items, let's say, in half an hour, and you get to 1 or you get to 2. Because that could happen otherwise. It took longer than you thought. But as often as not, something happened, like the meeting got hijacked by a goblin. Somebody who decided to take it down a technical discussion rabbit hole rather than the 3-minute summary. And next thing you know is 20 minutes later, and you're still in the first thing. So that's a failure in a sense. And then when you leave the meeting, this is what makes people unhappy, to Rich's point. They leave and they say, we're supposed to discuss 4 things. We discussed 2. We didn't come up with any decisions. Now, sometimes there might be good reasons for that. But if you get better at this, you're running meetings better. You get lessons learned, you get feedback. Okay, we'll do 3 next time, and I'll keep it on track. It's up to the person running the meeting, not the people attending. It's up to the person running the meeting to make sure it stays on track and on time, and says something like the following: thank you for your feedback, Bob. But we need to move to question 2. But there's still more to say, Jim. I understand that, Bob. Well, I'm going to schedule another meeting to discuss that technical item that you just brought up. So successful meeting is one where we address all the items, we have decisions made to the extent we can, or maybe we find out somebody wasn't there that needed to make a decision. We have action items assigned with people's names and due dates. Then when the people leave, they say, that was a good meeting. Maybe it didn't hit all the marks, but that was a good meeting instead of one of these lousy ones I go to. And then it doesn't create the virus Rich talked about. Sets a standard for that. So I think it's incumbent. And I will tell you my number 1 tip that's always been in the book. I'm going to phrase it in a different way. Stop looking for unconditional love. Don't sit in front of a meeting and because you want Bob to like you, let him ramble on. You're not there running a meeting for Bob to like you. You're sometimes going to have to say the harsh, not harsh, but be the person that says, we're going off track here. Because the other 10 people in the room will look at you like, why isn't Jim controlling this meeting? Right? So sometimes people will feel a little disgruntled, but you, in a nice way, say, we need to get to these other items. What's the escape valve from that? You tell that person, we will take a whole half hour and just discuss your one technical item. Say, okay, thank you. Do not ignore them. So success means that you've met the objectives, assuming they were laid out. Now, Rich, does that meet your?
It does, absolutely. And one other really important point: if those other people, other than Bob, are looking around at themselves and at you, saying, why isn't Jim controlling this meeting? They're also judging your ability as a project manager.
Correct.
And
Even unconsciously.
they're
Right.
doubting your ability. Because if you can't even manage your way or lead your way through a meeting,
A half-hour meeting.
How are you leading the project? And
Right.
so the confidence level in you goes down.
Right.
This is why the skill of running meetings, this facilitation skill we talk about in the book, isn't just a meeting skill. It's actually going to reflect on the buy-in that your team gives you when you want to inspire them to get work done, way beyond the meeting.
And you have to have some dynamism in your voice and your presentation. You can't get up and speak in a monotone. I remember years ago, I went to Chicago for a presentation skills. So you're jingling the keys in your pocket when you talk, Jim. You're talking in a monotone or whatever. So if you don't know how to do that, you have to be able to get up and do that. There's a lot expected of project managers.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot expected. It's what I call a high wire act, and especially as you get into more important projects, people at NASA run projects to put rockets in the moon. They don't want to have a project manager, or wherever they're going, who mumbles, who can't run successful meetings. They won't last very long. So it's a very competitive project management world. So we want people to, and this is a very important. This is a building block skill. Nothing romantic about this. This is a building block skill that people should have, and it's a part of communication. So it's part of writing, reading well, communicating well, communicating succinctly. That's success in that, and that'll be noticed by management too, right, and by everybody else. Go. Good.
Yeah. Okay. So next question. So I loved your Zen chapter. So I was wondering, how could practicing Zen help with meeting facilitation?
Well, let me take this one again, then Rich will bounce off from that. Let me explain how this came to be. We have a chapter called Zen and the Art of Facilitation. Yeah. Where did that come from? In 1974, a book was written called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It was a book about a father and son on a cross-country motorcycle tour. It's very philosophical about the relationship between the father and the son. Big bestseller. Guy named Robert Pirsig, Pirsig. So when we were writing that chapter, I just popped into my head Zen and the Art of Facilitation when we wrote the first book. So when we didn't really play off of it. When it came to the second, this book is an upgrade. I said to Rich, should we maintain that? And he said, yeah, let's play off of it a little bit more. Yeah, yes, we are showing our age. I read about it in the book. He said, let's play off of it a little bit. The important thing is, it's not about practicing Zen. It's having a Zen attitude. So you can practice Zen or not, right? We don't want to, it's not a Zen book or anything. We're not practitioners of it, but it's an attitude. In my case, I'll translate that. I'll give you a perfect example. And maybe it's not exactly that, but give you an example of how I think of it. I once worked at a company where we were creating a major internet service. And we were the software development shop. And we had to hand off the support of that to the next group. But the next group wasn't ready. They hadn't learned the software yet. So what had happened is the people on call had to be the people who had actually written the software. And some of these guys were not kids. They were in their 50s and 60s. They'd gone through the hoops. So one guy came into my office red-faced, angry at me. How dare you tell me to be on call at 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever. I'm a senior, blah, blah, blah. Red-faced. What did I do? I got cooler. As he got hotter, I got cooler. That's my Zen interpretation. I'm not practicing it. My thing was stay calm, stay in the moment, let him vent. Don't get excited. Wait till he calms down, talk him through it. That worked well. And I can remember thinking of this today when I saw this question. I remember later, like a week later, he brought his daughter and introduced me to her. It was like it never happened. So my version of Zen, and Rich could give his, is just being in that moment and staying cool within that. But it doesn't mean you have to become a Zen practitioner. That wasn't the intention of the chapter. Rich, what are your thoughts? You can take yourself on mute. We'll hear you better.
That's true. I was practicing Zen by being quiet. I think you nailed it. I don't think there's anything else has to be said. You covered it. Perfect.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that make sense, Evelyn? Or anybody have questions about that? That's where we're going with that.
Does anyone have questions?
That's a good book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It's very interesting. It's very 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
Not that we remember those. Rich and I don't always remember those, but we read books about that era.
Yes, we did.
Who's
the
the
book
book by? A guy named Pirsig, Pirsig. It's either Richard or Robert, Pirsig. If you look up Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance up on Amazon, you'll find it. Good book, interesting book, very philosophical, a complete diversion from anything that was in the market at the time. Or again, so I've read.
Okay.
Yeah, I like I've tried meditating, Zen.
Okay.
It didn't really
None of that can hurt. None of that can hurt you in the business world. There are people who will say things, as you know,
Mhm.
angrily to you,
Yeah.
angrily. And even if it's unjustified, the question is, how do you react? Rich, go for it.
Yep. All right. So this question, I'll just read it.
Oh,
What are some examples?
sure, if
Oh,
you want. Yeah.
am I coming through okay?
Yeah.
Some examples of micro and macro body language. So body language is important in communications, and at meetings is body language. People are sitting there at your meeting like this, closed body language. I would say things that have to do with just flailing of the arms, walking away. These are macro body language. Micro body language, and we have a chapter on this as well. And we take advantage of some experts, including FBI directors and so forth, who've studied this for very important reasons. A wrinkle of the nose, a raised eyebrow. These are micro communication. And really, one of the things I like to teach is this idea of vocalics. Jim mentioned it, don't talk in a monotone. The things that you do with the tone of your voice, and there's so much, your voice is a musical instrument, even if you're not, as we would say in New England, a singer. Use my New England accent. Even if you're not a singer, that hurts to say that. Your voice box is an instrument. You can change its volume, its breathiness. You can use staccato tone.
Mhm.
Your mom and dad may have done that to you, right? You can have rising or lower tones in your voice. There's all kinds of things that you can do that you should do, including pauses, including whispering, even at certain times. Use these. That's vocalics. That's another example. It's a little off the topic of body language per se, but it should mirror. It should mirror your body language. So if you have closed body stance, your legs are crossed, your arms are crossed, it's hard for you to say to the room, I'm open to all your ideas, because they're looking at you and they're saying, either he has to go to the bathroom or he's really closed off to my ideas, or he's cold as well. And we also make that comment, right? Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Sometimes there's just, maybe you're scratching your eye because you have an itchy eye. Maybe you're raising your eyebrow for some medical reason and it has nothing to do. So you have to allow for the human body and the way it tends to act. But there are trends and there are ways we as project managers need to be attentive to meeting attendees when it comes to macro and micro body language. And again, we talk about in the book, there's even some diagrams on seating, where you sit at the table, depending on culture as well. Where you sit, where you're told to sit at the table can have some meaningfulness as well. That's another example of macro body language.
Too, when we wrote the book, we had a few colleagues and friends of ours review it, and one of them said, geez, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the chapter or the stuff about body language because it can be misinterpreted. We agreed and we put this disclaimer. We are not body language experts. However, some of it's very simple. And I forget the name of the book. In the book, we quote a book that I had read on it. So you can find body language books and videos galore. So you should really spend some time. You do it anyway. You subconsciously interpret body language, but understand facial things and the tics that people have. So you read a book or two about it, and then you don't overinterpret it when somebody's cold or whatever, as Rich says. But get a little bit of basic training on it. You don't have to be an expert, but enough to know when people are resistant to you in some way, or even open to you. And one of the obvious things is I did a number of years. Both Rich and I teach project management certification. It's called PMP, and I taught it for years virtually like this. And it was great. And I'm actually going to be doing it next month. But then after, I think it was like after 9, I've been doing it for a long time. After 9 years, I went back into not an office, but a hotel. And it was great to see people nodding their heads when they got something and shaking their heads when they didn't. You can see the imperceptible nod that they're making. Although here's the other caveat I'll give you in the body language, and I quote it in the book. That's why I quoted the book. There was one culture, I forget what, maybe it was Bulgarian,
Area.
where the guy is the body language expert's talking to a woman and a guy, and she's either shaking her head no or nodding her head. Yeah, the nodding of the head and the shaking of the head were exactly the opposite of the American version. If you nodded your head yes, you meant no. That's why they were miscommunicating. He kept reading that. And I think he gave the guy a thumbs up, and that guy was offended by that. So taking it in a larger respect, watch out trying if you're working in a different culture. Rich spent a couple years overseas. I've worked virtually and in person overseas. I worked with the Middle East. Watch out for that. And when I was communicating, and I don't know which of these it fits in with, Rich. I was working with a guy from Bahrain who was the director of a telecommunications. We were communicating via WhatsApp. I waited to see what kind of emoticons he would use. When he used a thumbs up, I used a thumbs up. I waited to see what he would do. I was very cautious about that. So remember, take what Rich said and multiply it by X when you're working multiculturally, because you don't want to take, say, I'm going off topic here a little bit. You don't want to skim your business card across the table in Japan, because they will find that very insulting. And watch out for body language, the showing of the feet in the Arab world, etc. So be careful about that, especially multiculturally.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's do some interaction with everyone here. First, the book Great Meetings Build Great Teams lists several meeting personalities called, well, they're mostly negative. That's why they're called goblins in the meeting. And they're all listed on this slide, like Tina, Nadia, Passive, Rosie. And so have you met any of these meeting goblins? And like how did you handle them?
So this is for your participants, correct?
Participants,
Do
like
you want people to speak up or chat?
Yes, please. Don't be Rosie the reticent here.
Right. Or Billy the bully.
Although we'll take him over Rosie the reticent.
Anybody want to either speak up or chat to us at your experiences?
Yeah.
Hello, this is April.
Sure.
Hi, I'm a supervisor, but I'm actually still being quote unquote trained.
Right.
We have 2 flows in our team.
Oh.
Very distracting. They really take the meeting off course of what we're talking about. And like you said, the person that has the that's presenting the meeting needs to take over.
Right.
And normally it's my manager that does that very, very well. But yeah, we say save the questions at at the end of the meeting.
Right.
Or off the top, when we close out the meeting, if you have any additional questions, that's what she says.
Does that work generally? Does she have any other tips for us besides that? That sounds great. Are there any things you notice she's doing that you could share?
That's about it. Just when take it off, once we're done with the meeting, or we keep everyone on mute.
And she's firm about this, right?
Oh yes, most definitely.
Firmness is important.
Yes.
I think she's great. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear you ran into this, but that's being handled well.
Yes. Good.
Oh, I have another one.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Stand deep.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about Sandeep.
Well,
Yes.
Sandeep is a new person.
Mhm.
Just learning new things, learning healthcare. And Sandeep's mom has been with us for a while. She's in that department, so she taught him everything. But you can't be taught everything within 6 months to a year. So Sandeep, my supervisor professionally kind of toned him down. But he's still Sandeep's when he works.
Is the dramatically expressive? Is he acting out? What's he doing? You know?
He is a she, right?
She?
It's a he.
Oh, it's a he. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh goodness. He acts like he knows everything and he's been in the field for years.
Oh my God, I ran into one of those too. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things I believe we talk about in the book as well is that, this is a person who obviously wants look at me, look at me, look at me.
Right.
Yes.
Maybe, offer them a chance to specifically to present, to talk about something so that you kind of relieve that pressure. Otherwise, they'll look for any opportunity to take the stage, so to speak.
Right.
So that's, you want, just like Tina, Nadia, the naysayer, has negative things to say, and I hope someone gives an example of that. The solution for that's actually a very good thing when you're doing threat identification. You say, Nadia, thank you for that. I know you say this will never work, that'll never work, this will never work. Let's talk about all the risks to the project and the negative risks, meaning the threats, at a very dedicated meeting where you'll get to bring these all up. But right now we're talking about the schedule.
Right.
So
you must show people respect, no matter how, right?
Yes.
And then that'll work. I agree with that. There are people that actually, April, my situation of that wasn't a dramatically expressive person, but when I was working on that project that just came off of it 2 months ago, there's also a thing in Agile called a coach. I'm an Agile coach, and you coach teams to work within Agile because it's a whole different philosophy and there's a lot of people skills involved. And my Agile coach counterpart in Lyon had coached a young woman who was a project manager into doing Agile. And a week later, she was telling us not what we were doing wrong, but what the teams were doing wrong, with a complete misunderstanding of the job that she was doing. I don't think she was being dramatically expressed. I don't know what she was doing. Maybe she was just trying to show that she was large and in charge, but it wasn't working. And my counterpart had to do a lot of coaching to explain, no, you really misunderstand this, and do it in a way that was, I want to say, compassionate, because she just didn't get it. So I think that's not even a goblin. And maybe it is. Maybe we need a new one, Rich, the person that just doesn't get it and needs a lot of coaching. I don't know. Because that person could also disrupt the meeting by constantly throwing out misinformation.
Right. And remember, these are personalities, not people. So at any given time, that person who's acting as Sandeep, April, could also suddenly, maybe if someone says, Sandeep, we've heard enough from you, could turn into Rosie and be suddenly just, turn the opposite way and just say, okay, evidently my opinion doesn't count here, and get quiet. And now you really need to hear from Sandeep and he's shutting up. So these are personalities that come out in meetings, not individual people. And that's really one of the key points of this part of the book.
Although someone like Guo, I think we pronounce it Guo, talks too long or too much. We all know people who just go on and go on and go on. I have a friend like that. And often people will say, I know I talk too much, and they'll keep talking. So
being self-aware is,
but they're doing nothing about it. So, I mean, you have to sort of curtail that. I just want to emphasize to you folks, you are what we call large and in charge, whether you're running the meeting or whether you're running the project. If you're not running the meeting, somebody else in the room is.
Yes.
And it's going to be a goblin or just somebody who just likes to talk.
Other examples, we really enjoy hearing people's real examples.
Yeah.
I don't know what our time is, but or how many more we have left, but
Can we
maybe
take
one more? Any other thoughts? Give me the opportunity to train us. Yeah.
Hi, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to echo what Professor Maltzman just said. Those are personalities, and sometimes my personal experience taught me sometimes good ideas can come from quiet people. So yeah, so because I feel I was a quiet person, so just remember to engage those people, encourage them to say, maybe the best way, based on my experience, is to talk to them before the meeting, and then understand what their concerns are. So when you feel there's a good timing, you can, encourage her to share his or her opinions during the meeting. Just my 2 pennies.
And before we get to Roxy, I think it is, I want to comment on something. When Rich and we have a thing called a work breakdown structure in project management. You put stickies on a board and you define your meeting. Very often the people that are standing there putting up on the board are arguing with each other, and the introvert So you say, can you write some ideas down? So you give them something that makes, you don't try to force them to the stage, but you give them something that makes them feel comfortable until they can come out of that. But Roxy, go ahead.
Okay, so I've met one of like the goblins in like a meeting because during like COVID and like so a lot of stuff were like on Zoom meetings or like online.
Mhm.
So we had like orchestra online. And so they would choose like the teachers to help out. They would choose like a few kids to like help out and just make sure like everybody's okay and stuff. And so they had like the chat on as like to everybody, and then you could talk to the teachers separately, but not so that all the kids could talk to each other because it would be distracting. But there was a few people, you were supposed to have your cameras on because you're like still in orchestra practice, even though it's online. But there's always a few people that had their cameras off. And then they would use the like everyone chat and have like private conversations while we were rehearsing.
Oh boy.
So like the teachers like couldn't like just stop like everybody to like tell people to like stop typing, but then afterwards they would like tell them like please don't use the chat, but they would keep doing it. But like as a result of those just like 2 to 3 people like just using the everyone's chat and like bothering people, we just had to remove the chat just like from everybody's use, and it was like really annoying. But those 2 people like they learned their lesson. But yeah,
You know, that's the nuclear option. If you have to use it, you use it. If you can't get people to have that kind of enough self-control, you know, the problem with all the chat stuff, social media stuff, some people just can't control themselves. Like you said, they learn their lesson, and maybe you bring it back up at some point and give another chance. But people will say things, and sometimes say things they shouldn't say. Just as a side note, when I was working at that financial organization, I was there as a contractor, and we were going to have a big, I think I talk about this in the book too, a big meeting in Boston, people from Dallas and from other parts of the country. And I found out that one of the women had been on a chat or had been on a meeting, and she said something very negative about a senior manager on the everyone chat, and it didn't help her career. She was still around, but she wasn't on the fast track to success. So it can be dangerous too.
Yeah, if you think about Sidebar Sal, we are picturing Sidebar Sal as someone in the meeting, talking to their friend next to them, saying, "Oh, this I don't know about this guy," right? That's kind of what we meant.
Right.
But with virtual meetings, that goes to broadcast.
Yeah.
Now, one quick funny story from teaching. We have chat going when we do online classes, and I have a lot of students from Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
And a pair of them were talking about the class, perhaps even talking about me in Kazakh, which is written in Cyrillic. Now, they didn't realize that was on the public chat, not on a private chat. So suddenly I'm seeing Kazakh showing up on the screen. What do? I get my translator app going, and I write back to them both in Kazakh, which blew their minds, and also stopped them from ever doing that again.
Right.
Because now they think I can speak Kazakh, which I cannot really. I can say Rahmet, which means thank you. So the key is any of these personalities have a steroidal effect when it's virtual.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind.
True. Virtual is a whole different beast, as we see here. That we talk in our book, going off a little bit off topic here, about Zoom fatigue. And the way people are looking at pictures, you may turn their camera off or not. You're looking at yourself all the time. You don't get the full body language. It's a whole different meeting. Don't treat the virtual meeting like the in-person meeting. They're completely different. In person, you get the full person. Online, you're getting a little bit of a different version of that person, if you will.
Yeah,
not that they're acting differently necessarily, but
For example, Roxy is just a G today.
There you go.
Sorry, Roxy. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so let's move on.
Yep.
Doing pretty
Oh, you had another case study, right?
Yeah. So, thank you everyone for your participation. Now let's look at another case. At the beginning of the semester, Mary won the president role of a student club focusing on helping disadvantaged kids.
Now we see Roxy.
She is now about to hold her first team meeting on October 1st to plan out a winter camp on coding for grades K-3 kids. What advice would you provide to Mary in order to have an effective first club meeting?
So that's for our participants, that we maybe hopefully you've learned something in this hour that you can start to address this question.
Right. So all you
Speak
all,
up.
Mary has come to your office or your room, and she's wants to know, hey, you went to that meeting. What advice do you have for me? Because I'm going to start this winter camp. What should I do for my first meeting?
I
So
think, yeah. And do you have your hand up?
Yes, since I am educator, I think to start. So I think the first meeting is really to get to know the team before move to
Good
the
point.
planning work. Yeah, get to know the team, and then yes, start building the team.
I think that's true. I just typed in icebreakers, using those sometimes. It's a good point. You're not just like running the thing. Who are we? Let's get to know each other. You can have a little bit of fun. We've used icebreakers before. There's whole sites on those, and get to know the team as people. Because often we get to know the connection before context. We get to know each other within the context of the team. Outside, you find out they own a dog. They like traveled to, I don't know, Alaska. So you find interesting things about people when you talk to them as human beings and not just as team members, if you will.
Yeah. If you're interested in that, there's actually a gentleman I've been following, and I wish some of these things I wish we could have gotten into the book, but we have a website that we can put supplemental information. There's a gentleman named Chad Littlefield, I believe his name is, and he has a book called Ask Powerful Questions, but he also does a bunch of videos, and one of them is this whole theme of connection before context. And he says, you should have a chance at just like Jan said at the meeting, where, let's just spend a minute introducing ourselves. And in some cultures that's normal, right? In Southern Europe, for example, that's expected. Let's talk about the soccer match for 3 hours before we even have a meeting. So some of it's cultural, but he's saying that this is a really important part of this kickoff meeting. This first club meeting is really this idea of connection. So thanks, Jan.
It looks like Shelly Ann has her hand up.
Yep, Shelly.
Hello, I kind of late to coming to this meeting, so I apologize.
No worries.
Talking about, getting groups together, because I suggested having a study group with my people, and I did not know you guys were having this, so I had to conduct my own meeting before I jumped on this.
Okay.
All right.
But I am familiar with trying to get people to open up. I agree with Jan about, doing icebreakers. We used to do like trivia, or we'll have some kind of interactive game that you can all share on the screen to ask questions. So my particular micro company, because we're in a micro company, we do trivia every morning before we have our stand-up. So it's something to kind of get us in the mood to actually start doing our meeting. So I do trivia very well. I know a little about everything, which is, I don't know if that's good or bad, but we do trivia, and that's a good way to connect to everybody.
I think that's interesting because, it's a funny, when I read the question, my project management mind went to create an agenda, this and that, but you're right. This is a first meeting. Let's just get together and, at some point, I think after you break that, you can say, well, Rich and I do this all the time. We met earlier today about this and some other things. We talked about a bunch of stuff. We did a little bit. We do trivia all the time. We talked about Wordle, which we always do. We schmooze a little bit, but we know each other. We still did that. And we sort of eased our way into it. You're right. You're all right. As a first meeting,
There's one other piece. There's one other piece I hope that the group will get without us about this first meeting for coaching for Mary. And we did talk about it early on, which seems like 5 hours ago, but only was 3 minutes ago or so.
Right.
What do you think I'm getting at? Anyone? One other thing in this first meeting we want to talk about? Once we know each other.
I think I know what it is.
No, you don't count.
I know, but I'm just saying.
I mean, you do count. You count tremendously.
I count somewhat. I think I know.
Anyone? Shelly Ann?
Again, I know I'm late, but I late came to the meeting, but I'm thinking you want to learn how everybody's working style is.
Right.
Because you want to know what they're best at doing, because if they don't want to be micromanaged and be hovering, or maybe they work well with teams and they need to bounce off ideas. Some people are better at emailing versus calling.
Right.
So you can't if you're expecting an email, but you keep getting all this voicemail stuff, it's like, why keep getting all the voicemail? Well, maybe she's more of a verbal talker than
Yes.
a literal talker. So you got to learn people's different communication styles.
Yes,
I agree. That financial
Outstanding.
place I worked at, the woman said, the VP should just chase me down. She's downstairs at a gym. Find me outside the gym. I'd walk down the hall with her. You can send emails. These people get 200 emails a day. Your email is going to get buried. So it's a lot easier to just find out their communication. I think maybe you were getting at humor, Rich. Is that possible?
Nope.
Okay, then tell
Should
us.
we leave this? Should we let this hang a little longer? Or
Well, we're almost done here, I think.
all
So
right, let me say what I was going to say, and that is success. I think the first meeting you have to hold up as the second habit of the highly effective people, Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Habit number 2, begin with the end in mind.
Right.
Draw a picture for to Shelley Ann's point. Absolutely. Right. Some of your people are visual. They want to see a picture. What are we doing here? In Mary's case, right? Show a picture of smiling kids at a computer camp, right? This is what we're aiming at. I think it's really important from a motivation perspective. First connect, and you were talking about that, Shelley Ann, and then also connect in terms of what are our ways of working. But when you get into the meat of the meeting, because it can't all be Wordle. I mean, we'd love it to all be Wordle, but it can't all be Wordle.
So it sounds like we need to wrap up.
Yeah.
Is that our last slide, or do you need to do some housekeeping, Evelyn?
Yeah, do your housekeeping if you'd like.
There's a Q&A slide, and
Right.
after this, then we're pretty much
On to history.
and then we're done. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So anyone have any questions?
Yeah, Jan, is that your hand from before, or is that a new hand?
Oh, yeah, it's from before.
Okay.
Sorry. And also wondering, because we have limited time, I mean, Professor Maltzman and
Just say Rich.
would you mind, leaving your like an email or LinkedIn profile in the chat for the audience in case they want to ask you?
No, not a problem. Not a problem. So I'll put it in there now.
I'll do it as well, but I'll be happy
I'll
for
put
you
the
to defer
website
to
too.
Rich.
What's that?
I said I'll put mine in too, but I'll be happy for them to send questions to you.
And then project meetings.us is our website, and where the dot is to be read as an R. Project meetings are us. So, and by the way, if anyone does buy the book, thank you. But we thank, and if it's a positive review, click on the submit button. If it's a negative review,
Think about it for a while.
click on the close window button.
There you go. No questions? We're
Further?
Okay. Hold on. I think there's some.
Rich, did you put your email in?
I did.
Okay.
I did. exclaim@bu.edu. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So thank you all for sharing. Project Management Ready exists for the mission of nurturing the next generation of project leaders. According to the Project Management Institute report, by 2030, the world needs about 25 million new project management employees. Youth are tomorrow's project leaders. I would like to invite any adult professionals who are joining us today or listening to the event recording to share your leadership or leadership development insights with our youth. Do you guys have any comments or insights?
Us in particular?
Yeah.
Us guys?
That number is true. If your PMI does have that, I notice a lot of the jobs where America too, but in the Far East and what China needed a lot. So there's, the market is growing. I've seen in my own profession, my own career, with having both traditional project management and Agile under my belt, my opportunities have expanded exponentially. So it's an interesting career, pays pretty well. It's not as dry as it might sound. It's challenging, and you get involved in a lot of cool stuff, making cool stuff. So it's a good under the radar profession sometimes. I think.
And whatever field you are in, and even life itself, project management helps, because when it comes to a birthday party, a wedding,
A vacation,
a vacation to Alaska,
for example.
controlling the budget, making sure everyone's happy, building a team, no matter what job you have or in home life, building teams. That's really the fundamental part of project management, building and leading teams. And that's an ingredient to success in any career. So what you will not lose if you study project management, you can't, you can't, it cannot hurt, and really help your career.
Even if it's just part of it isn't your main job, it can be something you understand. It will help you a lot. That's all she wrote.
Okay. Okay. And thank you, Professor Maltzman and Mr. Stewart, for joining us and having an engaging conversation with our audience about how great meetings can build even greater teams. The book purchase link and barcode are included on the screen for everyone to use. And at the same time, I would like to invite you all to join our next virtual book talk, When Symphony Meets Project Management, a story of a saved contract season by CEO Gerald Leonard.
That
This
sounds
talk,
interesting.
yeah, it is. This talk will be in September. Please subscribe to us and to receive registration notifications. Yeah, thank you all for joining this evening. Please kindly complete a 1-minute survey using the link or barcode on the screen. Please subscribe again to our monthly newsletters to learn about our events and be updated. If you're a PMI certified member, please contact me via email to request a PDU certificate. My email is shown on the screen. Thank you, everyone.